Hi, I'm Katelyn McArdle. Welcome to Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points.
Hey folks, this week we have a special guest with us in the virtual studio, Katelyn McArdle. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us. We're super thrilled to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
So we have a job ad coming to the pipe that is in Katelyn's wheelhouse. It is in the nonprofit space in the US. And this week, that means we're going to be digging into this job ad, and it sounds like it was written by a Civil War reenactor with a thesaurus and smoke in their eyes. Enter the communications associate for a nonprofit that preserves Revolutionary War battlefields in the United States. And nothing says 21st century PR like peddling the power of place to people who'd rather scroll their timeline at a taco stand. If you want to spin stories about 250-year-old battles, coordinate events for policy wonks, and turn ad copy into donor dollars, this job might be for you. But there's a twist. Social media, it's a no-no. After reading the job ad, I was left with just one question. Is this a communications role or a time machine with a 403B attached? Let's find out.
Wow.
As usual, we're going to start off with the roasty profile. So the job title for this position is Communications Associate. The report to title is the Director of Communications. Company size or organization size, in this case, is 11 to 50 employees. The industry is nonprofit organizations. What do they do? Well, they acquire and preserve land and historical sites in the United States relevant to the American Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the American Civil War. Head office location for the organization is in Washington, D.C. The job location is also in Washington, D.C. The geographical operating area for the organization is the United States. And the type of job is permanent, exempt, and hybrid. And a note for listeners at home, exempt in the US means that they are exempt from some normal labor protections like minimum wage. And there are a few other things, overtime pay, that federally regulated organizations don't have to really kind of pay attention to. So this is one of those. Now, given that this job ad is short and sweet, it's basically one page, I think that I'm going to read through the entire thing instead of picking up the juiciest bullet points for us to talk about. Because with some other ads that we've looked at in the past, everything kind of ties together nicely and it's self-reinforcing. So I think we'd be doing ourselves and the folks at home a bit of a disservice if we skipped over parts of it. The structure of the job ad itself, there are two sections. First section is major duties and responsibilities. And the second section is required knowledge, skills, and experience. Starting off with major duties and responsibilities, these are all bullet points as one might expect with a job ad. Proactively generate attention for the trust, its programs and initiatives by advancing messaging that defines the brand and expands reach and impact. And for anyone who is listening to the show for the first time, we don't name and shame. So we don't name the organization while we're talking about it and about the job ad. So you'll kind of see that I say things like the trust or the organization, where otherwise you'd expect a name to be there. It's all by design. Also, Jen and I don't have lawyers, so we're going to skip that ugliness too. Next bullet point, orchestrate logistics surrounding events to support policy department programs, such as news conferences, grassroots advocacy briefings, and partner workshops. Maintain and fulfill display advertising calendar to include ideating copy and visuals that provide timely and meaningful updates in worthwhile outlets. Instill processes for tracking metrics stemming from print and other non-digital advertising. Strengthen the pipeline that converts content consumers into donors. Advance brand building opportunities, including paid media, content marketing, sponsorships, and collaborations that introduce new audiences to the Trust's work. Coordinate the nomination process for the Nonprofit Prize for History. working with publishers and authors to solicit and verify submissions. And a note, this is actually a prize that this organization has. It's a part of a trust fund, and they dole out money from it. Next bullet point is write and edit articles, emails, columns, and articles about trust activities for a variety of audiences, outlets, and formats. Then ensure appropriate and consistent use of trust brand and voice, and style guide. Create and produce physical collateral regarding trust initiatives and programs for battlefields, historic sites, and museums that are aligned with our mission, coordinating placement and fulfillment. So let's break there before we go into the last section. This was, for me, there were about 10 bullet points in this, and there's a lot of detail there. Like, it gave you a sense of what the job is going to be about, like the big things that you are going to be in charge of, which is, for some people, maybe not the best. For other people, great. It really depends on the kind of person that you are, whether you're really going to like this level of detail in the job that you're doing, or whether you want a little bit more flexibility and ambiguity. But is there anything in here, either Jen or Katelyn, that speaks to you about the duties and responsibilities? Is there any of the story that's surfacing so far from this?
Well, I would say it sounded like it's a good overview of the programs of the nonprofit. So I thought that it had a good indicator of the events portion, and then the general outreach and communication, and also the trust, being able to distribute funds from the trust was an interesting one too. So I think that speaks to their desire to have a reputation boost element of their organization as well. I think when I heard the events portion of the job description, it made me wonder if there's potentially a risk that there's event logistics and coordination involved in this role. there can be that scope creep where that doesn't really sound like communications role. That sounds like there's definitely the potential that they would have to take on event logistics, and that would be very challenging for someone just seeking a communication specific or marketing role. So I always try to look out for that some of these bullet points sneak in what could be other functions or specialties into an otherwise creative role.
Those were exactly my thoughts, Katelyn. I kind of made a note that it feels very much like a coordinator type role. I think there were only maybe 2 or 3 bullet points that spoke specifically to like the communications work itself. A lot of those terms like coordinating and things like that, just like you said, snuck in there. So it makes me wonder how much, like you said, creative satisfaction is someone going to get from this role if they're going to be spending a lot of time doing coordination stuff, which is also interesting because this is one of the rare roles, and I'm going to give them points for this, that notes the reporting structure. And so it's a comms associate reporting into a director of comms, which means that there is no manager of comms. That's what that tells me. And so it does seem like this person is going to be doing a lot of the administrative work for the director of comms. I wonder if this is a new role. I wonder if this is a backfill for an existing role. I wonder if maybe they're trying to go lean and they're eliminating something else and just trying to do that whole like Swiss Army knife into one role. Because yeah, it doesn't seem like all the comms people I know are creative souls, and this doesn't seem very creative. And it feels like this would be an opportunity to have a lot of fun with a role like this. And then my other observation is not so much about the job description at this point, but whether or not, Paul, are you planning to apply for this role because your beard is looking quite robust today?
I knew you were going to say something about my beard because it's been a few days since I've like properly trimmed it, and it's getting bushy.
He's bushy.
Yes, no, let's keep on that line where I'm actually going to apply for this role and I want to look the part for the interview, so I'm growing it out a little bit.
This is what I thought. Okay, thanks for the confirmation. Actually, I had to Google while you were talking. I'm like, did people have beards in the Civil War? Because like I'm Canadian. I have no knowledge about any of the US history. So yeah, they did. They did.
You've also never had a beard yourself, so there's that.
Exactly.
One thing that stood out for me that I know of. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about the next time.
Been a beard, had a beard, you know. It's all the same.
One thing that stood out for me with this is the branding of the role itself. And you kind of touched on it, Jen, where it's like, you know, this role is for communications associate, and then it reports to director of communications. So there's departmental fit. You know, this is a straight line. It's a communications department. In larger organizations, communications and marketing are separate. In smaller organizations, communications and marketing are kind of together. The roles are blended. In some organizations, the distinction doesn't matter whatsoever. But I also found it interesting that this is an associate level job, which I would kind of agree is pegged at kind of a coordinator position or coordinator level or a specialist maybe. If you're in the private sector. But the fact that it's a communications associate kind of stood out to me. Like, what are you trying to say by calling this role communications associate? What's the point of that? It's not something that you run into every single day. So I'm kind of curious about that, but I don't know if we'll get the answer, short of, you know, calling in the director and being like, why'd you call this an associate?
I think what a lot of the bullet points seemed to have in common is the need for a strong writer. So I wondered if they're trying to combine donor outreach with communications, where it's actually outreach to prospects or people who have applied to be considered for the trust. And so you would need a strong writer to communicate with anyone individually. But that's not necessarily, I think, what a communications associate would expect or would be looking for. I think they would imagine it's writing e-newsletters, it's writing social media copy, it's the traditional marketing at a brand level, but not necessarily the one-on-one touch points from a relationship management perspective. So it makes me think that there might not be a department, especially for the 11 to 50 employee sized company. Maybe they don't have a donor like stewardship department yet. And so it could be a hybrid where they're expecting communications to play that role in writing to individuals and being able to keep track of the story for each prospect. You know, what are the touch points and the relationships with each one of these individuals? But it sounded like there's marketing outreach and then there's communications, one-on-one outreach involved in what they're expecting this person to do.
Yeah. I also wonder too, like, will this, given that we're kind of already seeing a little bit, some hint of role creep in this, and you've got questions around that. I would also wonder if a part of this will bleed into grant writing a little bit, because the soft skills so far, the experience, it does kind of touch on and say like, oh, you need to be a really strong, communicative, persuasive writer. And when I think about nonprofits, especially nonprofits of kind of this scale, scope, and just where they're at in, you know, what they're choosing to do with their mission, grants are going to be a part of that. And if we think too about like, okay, we're actually buying land for a trust to preserve and conserve it, that suggests to me that there's going to need to be some capital flowing through this place, because you don't buy up hectares of land with $20 and like a bag of coffee. I mean, maybe you did during the Revolutionary War, but not today.
Yeah, and there was something too about tracking, like something about the process for tracking something. I started to write the notes, but I can't remember what that bullet point said. But it is, yeah, a very process heavy role, and I feel like nonprofits are notorious for that kind of scope creep, where it's like, I just wear a lot of hats, you know, like somebody started the position as a comms associate, but now that's not even how they refer to themselves when people ask what they do for a living. So it's interesting. And what you said too, Katelyn, like 11 to 50 people, as we know, that could very well be 11 people, right? Like just because it's so wide, I highly doubt that they have 50 people working there. It's going to be more like 11 people. And yeah, like we mentioned earlier, just keeping things lean. So yeah.
Instill processes for tracking metrics stemming from print and other non-digital advertising. Strengthen the pipeline that converts content consumers into donors. That's
what it was. It was converting that into donors, which is exactly what you mentioned about like fundraising and things like that. So I very easily can see this being, which goes back to why did we name it? Why did they name it communications associate? So far it's reading to me like almost anything but that. So interesting to see what the rest of the job posting says.
That would be a really interesting part of the job too, cracking that nut, because they're specifically saying like we want you to have some sort of system, set of metrics, KPIs for tracking return from print and non-digital advertising. Like digital stuff, super easy, right? Like the platforms just give you access to data and metrics, whatever. But yeah, print, that's challenging. Like you're looking at developing some sort of system using like ID or membership codes, maybe QR codes. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do with print, but it's like if you think about your behavioral analytics for stuff like this, digital is kind of a leaky sieve. Like it is not perfect whatsoever. Print, I wouldn't call that a leaky sieve. I'd call that like a bridge with a hole in it or a dam with a hole in it. Like that's even harder to get detailed information.
Print is going to be opting in as well, right? Like you are going to ask people to do an additional step of reporting how you heard about this or whereas digital is, like you said, there's a footprint in the background anyway that you can track easily. But yeah, print, that's going to be a really, like you said, hard nut to crack. And is it a comms job? Is it a comms job?
That doesn't strike me as something that typically rolls up to a communications person.
Yeah.
And the same goes for grant writing. That's very specific, nuanced. It's technical writing more than it is brand awareness and at the highest level. So you have to have that really specific understanding of where your nonprofit fits into that fundraising request and the requirements of any given grant. And I think they're also on the other side of it. If they're issuing out as a trust, they are accepting applications very likely for other organizations who would like funding. Then if this person is also responsible for evaluating any of that content or those applications, which it sounds like they are, they would be assessing that and also communicating back to everyone requesting this fund and saying yes or no or asking for more questions. It just the associate level doesn't seem accurate, and rolling up to communications doesn't seem correct either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, typical challenge that you see in small organizations, private sector or nonprofit, right? Like that role creep becomes a thing for a lot of folks. Let's move on to a subsection that is in this part of the job ad, and this is going to add a little bit more flavor to it. This subsection is about the role in organization. So it says the nonprofit, the nation's premier historic land preservation nonprofit, seeks a communications associate to build awareness of the trust, its mission, programs, and impact using earned, owned, and paid media, strategic partnerships, advantageous placements, and other innovative outreach avenues. You will introduce potential advocates and funders to our cause, saving hallowed ground and helping more Americans appreciate the ongoing resonance of our nation's history. As we mark the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War and our nation's founding, you will encourage Americans to experience the power of place by visiting battlefields and historic sites. Please note the creative functions of this role are outside our social media footprint. And again, what that means is like, you're not going to be spending a lot of time on social media or maybe they've got an agency. I don't know. It also says location, Washington, D.C. hybrid. And it says, again, reports to, which we know is the Director of Communications. Job classification, full-time exempt, which we read in the Roasty profile. There's a salary range listed, which is good. We'll save that till to when we go into the intermission. We'll do some salary guessing then. Benefits, it says that it includes vacation, sick leave, paid holidays, 403B retirement plan, and for folks listening in Canada, that's pretty much an RRSP. It's a plan that both you and your employer contribute to. Health and dental insurance, life and AD&D insurance. Jen, what's AD&D again? You know that one? I forgot it.
Accidental death and dismemberment.
Right. Disability insurance, paid parental leave, FSA, which I think we found out in one of the episodes we did recently. FSA is kind of like a healthcare spending account in the US.
I think it's health spending account, yeah.
Yeah. And these, flexible spending account
Flexible, sorry.
is the acronym. Yeah, but it's a healthcare spending account where you can decide what you spend the money on. And the last benefit that they list out is an on-site gym at the Washington, D.C. office. Now, with the flavor of this little subsection, what does that tell you guys? Like, for me, this is very tied to like that brand, right? And it's very tied to, hey, you know, we need to kind of operate as a PR outlet for this historical kind of thing, for understanding and appreciating the Revolutionary War, and we're really operating kind of more of a PR shop than we are like a click here and donate $20 kind of charity. It really sounds to me a little bit like that.
It's interesting because it sounds like they're approaching an anniversary. So to me, that means that they're going to be doing working on a campaign, right, to get visitors on the land and everything. But what's interesting to me is if that's part of kind of what this role is supposed to be doing, that part about social media, like that sentence, the way that sentence is written is so confusing to me. Like,
Weird.
Do you mind reading that one sentence one more time? Because is that what that means?
So it says verbatim, please note, the creative functions of this role are outside our social media footprint.
That means, so that, do you both interpret that to mean that you won't be doing social media for this role? Is that how that reads to you? So
it reads to me like they've got an agency. They've just hired an agency to do social media, and it's like, you know, you don't have to do it because there's an agency. Where I agree with you, the way that they've worded this, it's kind of like I would not want to work here. Like it's a con, because if I'm creative, I kind of want to participate in that. But you're telling me you're not gonna.
In this day and age, comms means social media. Like it really does. And one of the other bullet points, like right before that, I believe, was something about they want you to pursue other innovative outreach avenues. Okay, but not social media. So what other innovative outreach avenues are there besides, like, I don't know, you're asking this person to think outside of a box, but you're putting them in a very, very tightly locked box. So I don't really understand how they are going to do that. I think that's really, really interesting. Why wouldn't you want this person to do the social media? I mean, I took a quick gander, and this organization has social media, all of the channels. So it's interesting to me that this individual wouldn't be tasked with doing that, when I feel like that would be such a good creative outlet for them to do some fun and interesting things. But I'm gonna for sure go down the rabbit hole and look at what their social media posts are like. But maybe it is, like you said, maybe it is an agency. It's interesting that that's its own bullet point. We always talk about this on the show, but like if it's something that is a bullet point, it means it's there for a reason. It's very important. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to ignore that, but it seems to be a little bit of a mystery as to why they wouldn't have that as part of their role. Yeah, curious to hear your thoughts.
It makes me wonder if the person who has been in this role before has been, I don't want to say of a certain age, so I'll say of a certain disposition. And they came across the social media a long time ago and said, well, this is garbage. I don't want anything to do with this. It's dumb. it's like not great. It's for like children. I wonder if they ran into a situation like that and this person raised such a fuss and made such a stink that they hired an agency
Yeah.
to do it, and they kind of like got just ingrained in their DNA that social media is for whippersnappers and it's not for serious professionals.
See, that my read on it is different. My read is that they had someone doing it in-house and that person maybe tripped up a couple of times. Maybe they were too like cool with the social media.
Yeah, maybe they put practices on top of the cannons or something.
Yeah, like it didn't align with their brand or how they want to be represented. So I don't know.
I think I would have felt more comfortable reading it if it had said, you'll collaborate closely with the social media coordinator or the agency partner or something. But the fact that they said it in that particular way makes it feel like the organization itself doesn't agree with social media for some reason. And then they had just said, you will be overseeing owned, earned, and paid media. So how does it not overlap then with social media? And if maybe the communications director is the one responsible for social media, it would have been good to say that too, like that this is in the same department, but it's not your particular role. But the fact that it just says you will not have anything to do with creative social media development is a very strange way to put it. And it begs other questions. Why not? And where is it? And who's doing that?
It's
have you found that trend kind of going through your work, Katelyn? I mean, for the folks at home, Katelyn has an agency that works with a lot of nonprofits, functional authority. So she knows the nonprofit space better than Jen and I. But do you find that that's a trend with some organizations, Katelyn? Like they just do not pass go, do not touch social media. We hate this stuff. Is that a thing?
I think that it's an indicator that there's something the organization does not like about social media. Just the way they phrase that is so particular. But I think more often than not, I usually see descriptions like that explain that role's position with others too, so you'll be collaborating with the email marketing manager just to say that you're not responsible for email marketing. So I more often see that the relationship with the roles so that you can understand the structure of the department that you'll be in. But it is odd to just kind of rule out a communications arm in a communication specific role, to say we don't do that, or you definitely won't do that. Why not?
For sure. Moving on to the last section. So this is the entirety of the job ad that we're kind of coming into. This one is required knowledge, skills, and experience. Bullet points, of course. Bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience in communications and PR, marketing, publications, advertising, or other relevant creative field. Keen interest in American history and a flair for good storytelling. Exceptional writing abilities, including mastery of marrying tone and medium, coupled with proficiency in editing for grammar, clarity, and succinctness. Excellent organizational skills and attention to detail, especially in coordinating logistics for tangible events and products.
Ding, ding, ding.
There it is. Demonstrated ability to balance multiple priorities and meet firm deadlines while maintaining a results-oriented, entrepreneurial, and problem-solving mindset. An eye for good design, ideally paired with experience in graphic design and visual storytelling platforms. Proficiency in Microsoft Office Suite required. Experience with Adobe graphic design platforms desired. Knowledge of Drupal CMS and digital asset management valued. And then it goes on to say, to apply for the position, please send your resume, cover letter, salary requirements, and references to an email address, referencing communications in your subject line. No calls, please. And that's the entirety of the job ad. My gripe with Microsoft Office notwithstanding, I find it interesting that they said, we require this, we desire this, and we value that. So this again tells kind of a story of like, this role is going to wear a lot of hats. And we found that that bullet point where it's like, yeah, you're going to be coordinating event logistics, communications associate. So get ready for that, buckle up. But this also kind of says you're going to be a little bit of a graphics designer.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we all reacted when we heard that one bullet point. But what stood out for me more than anything else, because like I think the requirements make sense with the role. What stood out for me was that they require references upon application to the role. That's like, I can't express how much I dislike that. References are like social currency that you have earned, and you have to be really careful about how you use it. You can use it up. Like sometimes it's a big ask, depending on how references are used in organizations. It can be a really big ask. Like, are they wanting a letter of reference? How many do they want? Or are they wanting contact info in case they need to use your reference? Like, I would be hella cautious about handing out my references upon application. I've never seen that before. And it sounds like, Katelyn, like you would know more than I do, whether or not maybe this is a normal thing for nonprofits. I don't think that it is based on your reaction, but I just think that that's a big, huge ask, and I don't like it one bit. So that's what stood out to me most about that part.
Yeah, I think it is common in nonprofits to ask for references or clients if you're a consultant or an agency partner. Give us examples of relevant projects that what you think would be related to this. But asking a job seeker who will be looking for a full-time exempt job, especially likely early career, that's so risky. And they would probably have to use their current employer, because how many more employers do they have in their back, pocket that they would be able to use as references? So you might have to tell your current employer that you're looking for work when you're not ready to have that conversation. So I don't think it's appropriate for this kind of position to ask for that upon application, to your point.
Yeah, spending the social currency is the biggest thing for me. Like Jen's absolutely right. Like anytime you ask someone to be a reference, whether it's like someone's going to email you or call you, or whether it's like, can you write me a reference letter? You're putting an IOU down in the favor category. So at the end, okay, sure. You've got an offer kind of coming, and they want to talk to some references to, make sure that all the things that you told are truthful and whatever. That's fairly common. And from the person's perspective who's seeking the job, not crazy, because there's a good shot that spending that currency is going to get you something. But at the very start, no. And there's like, Jen and I have had conversations on the show before where it's like, reference checks, why are you even doing them? And I fully buy into that. Like, reference checks they're dumb. All that you prove with a reference check is that you have at least one person in your life who is willing to lie for you. Like, what does that tell you as an organization? Nothing.
Yep. There was a tangent that I was going to go on, but this isn't necessarily just about reference checks. It's about, that final section of the job posting. But it did make me think about that reporting structure and how you had said this is probably more of an entry level. It reads like an entry level position. I feel like they've shot themselves in the foot with the title that they gave this position. I think they should have said comms coordinator or something like that, because if we go back to them reporting into the director of comms, and that shows the individual that there is no ladder up in their career. It's comms associate and then director of comms. And unless the director of comms leaves, then where are you going to grow in your role? Right. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. If they would have started it as a comms coordinator, then maybe there is a bit more of a trajectory for that individual. But this makes me feel like it's just really not. Like, how long do they expect someone to stay in this role. It's not designed in a way that, to me, feels really sustainable, and like that someone would be interested in career growth and development with this role. So
I agree. And I think the word that triggered me was entrepreneurial for this level. Like, really? Because that to me means autonomous and innovative. And I would think an associate or even coordinator level would need a communications director level person to help them. And they would be shadowing and, they would need more mentorship or guidance. But this seems like the responsibilities are, you hit the ground running. You're going to be planning events. You will be communicating with supporters directly. You'll be assessing grant applications. This feels more like at least a mid-level job, that requires autonomy and the entrepreneurial spirit. So I think that word does not match the level that they positioned this role as.
It's a cultural mismatch too, right? Like everything about this job ad reads as, this is an organization that has a certain way of doing things. They like doing things that way. They have certain things that they do to bring in like donor money, and don't really screw with the system. But then it says you need to be entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurs screw with the system. Entrepreneurs, like, they are only successful if they're willing to break down barriers and rethink the way that things are being done. So for me, like, that's a cultural mismatch that could potentially create some conflict, create some clashes in the organization if you truly do get someone who is an innovative problem solver and thinks creatively.
I think companies love to throw around entrepreneurial mindset, entrepreneurial spirit, without actually understanding what that means. And I think companies want it to mean that you will do more with less, right? Like, it's going to be like low budget, but you're going to have to be creative and entrepreneurial and figure out how to do a lot with little bit of resources, when really to us it means like that autonomy to be able to do what you need to get the job done and have decision-making authority and have influence and things like that. But I think it's just such a mismatch of what companies think it means versus what in reality it means in order for them to be successful in their role. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we've come to the part of the show where it's time to guess how much money is attached to this thing. Jen absolutely loves it, but we'll give Katelyn first crack at this, and Jen, you'll be off the hook for guessing the salary for the first time in a very long time. Clap, please. Yay. So, Katelyn, what do you think this role is worth? It's a full-time role. It's based in Washington, D.C. It's exempt. Don't know if that matters for salary or not. They have some benefits that go along with it. This is a little bit like an entry-level-ish role, but there is some expectation that you are going to make decisions on your own and you're not going to need hand-holding. If you were looking at a job like this, what would you value it at?
Oh, so I already think it's going to be probably $15,000 less than it should be. So I think because they're calling it associate and that's kind of a coordinator level role, I think they're seeing it as junior level, but from our discussion, I feel like it should be a mid-level classification. So I already think there's going to be a pretty steep gap in job seekers who would have this experience to hit the ground running and to be autonomous and to really be successful in the required outputs of the role. All that said, I am guessing that the salary that they have posted for an associate level is probably between $45,000 and $50,000. I think it would be more appropriate in a $60,000 range, but that's probably not what it's published at. So that is my guess.
So this job, the salary range that they have posted for it, is starting at $55,000 US.
Oh.
And the top end is $63,000 US.
Okay.
Is that good? Is that fair? Is that generous? Like, you'll have much more of a sense of that than Jen or I would.
I think that is a more mid-level range for a nonprofit organization. So to me, that means that maybe they shouldn't have called it associate, and that it is actually a higher level position, but potentially is misclassified, I think, at a more junior level name. So that's what I am feeling from what they actually have published the range as.
Fair, it's a mismatch, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's also mismatch, I think, in they want someone with a bachelor's degree plus 3 years of experience.
Right.
Is that associate and higher? To me, that's like associate and lower.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to me that they would find someone with like, yeah, it feels like it's generous for someone that early in their career. I don't know. I think there are many mismatches, misalignments throughout this job posting.
There might also be a cost of living thing, because this role is based in Washington, D.C., and it's hybrid. So you're going to have to at least be within commuting distance of Washington for a couple of days a week, right? And maybe you don't live in Washington itself. Like, you could live in one of the feeder communities around. Like, there's even people who commute from like Baltimore into Washington for work. A little bit of a hike, but people do it, But perhaps there's something like that going on. Maybe given that this is an urban area and they envision this as a very entry-level kind of role, maybe they have to bump the salary up a little bit to attract candidates. Maybe there's something like that going on.
Yes. There are definitely hub locations throughout the states, so that's a big one where they'd have to factor in the cost of living.
One thing that stuck out for me too with this at the very end of the job ad is they post a salary range, right? Like we just talked about it. But they say, send us your resume, cover letter, salary expectations. So they're saying what they're willing to pay you, but they're also saying, what do you want to be paid? And like, yeah, 55,000 to 63,000, like that's a range. So maybe they're looking for you to say, give me 61,725, but it feels weird to ask for your expectations when there's a range posted.
I've seen that quite often. And I don't know if people would use, like, if you say 63,000, which is what my advice would be, I would always, as long as it's within the range and you're qualified, there's no reason then for someone to screen you out if you posted, your desired salary to be within their range still, even if it's at the top of the range. But who knows, that could be a barrier for some people, but you lose all of your negotiation power when you do that. Mm-hmm. So I really don't like that request at all. Like, if you come in and say, oh, I really want to make my odds better, so I'm going to price myself a little bit lower. Yeah, but that's it. They'll hold you to that. There is no more negotiation after that. You said that you were okay with 55, so we're giving you 55. Like, what changes now? And the only advice I can give the job seeker would be to then say, like, now that we've gone through the interview process and I have a better idea of the role, I think a more suitable, based on this new information, I think a more suitable salary would be X. And I think that's the only power you have in negotiation, but they really do take that power away from you by asking you to set your price right from the get-go. So I don't like that.
Yeah. My advice for folks who are in that position is to be a very squirmy wormy and say quite simply, the posted salary range meets my needs. Mm-hmm. And when you get to the offer stage, pull out your negotiating levers. Because Jen's absolutely right. If you say, 53, you're done. You're getting 53 if you get the job. That's it. And you might find through the interview process that for you, like, this is higher than 53. And sure, you can change your mind, but then you kind of lose a little bit because they can turn around and say, well, you said 53. And if you say, well, I didn't fully understand what this entailed, that is absolutely a fair comment, but they're still going to be able to kind of hold that against you a little bit. And you want to have as little of that as possible going into a negotiation. Like, you want to try and preserve your leverage, preserve the upper hand as much as you possibly can, because the employer is always going to have the upper hand to some extent, unless it's a crazy job market and you have very, very specific skills that are impossible to find and they cannot do without. that's really the only case where you have like leverage over the employer.
Yeah, no employer is ever going to be like, you had said 53, but we're just so blown away that we want to offer you 62. Like, they're just not going to do that. So yeah, you have to be really careful in situations like that.
Unless you're my wife. That actually happened to her once.
Well, we can't all be Claire, can we?
It's true. She told me, like, when she got the offer letter, she was like, oh, they actually added $4,000 more to this. And I was like, good for you.
Yeah, amazing.
You are a very special unicorn, dear. So with that in mind, folks, we are going to head into the intermission. We'll take a little break here. Katelyn and Jen and I will read over the job ad, and we will come back and render our final verdicts and scores on this job ad and role design. Stay tuned. All right, we are back, everybody, from the intermission. Katelyn and Jen and I have read the job ad, and we are ready to render our final verdict. Katelyn, thinking about the job ad itself, how it was written, what it communicated, what would you score this out of 10?
Oh, I think I would score it a 6 out of 10. Or maybe 5. I feel like there's a mismatch for job level. I think what I liked about it is that it does give a good overview of what the expected outcomes of the role are. So I think that was very specific. There's a component of event logistics, there's writing in different areas of the organization. So I think that it's not hiding much, but I just don't believe that it's a good match for the level of employee that they're looking for. And the entrepreneurial spirit, I don't think quite matches the culture that they're conveying with what seems to be a bit more regimented, process heavy, stick to what we're doing. We need a coordinator to keep all of these areas of the operation moving. And we need a doer, not necessarily an innovator or someone to come in and build something from scratch. So that's what I think this job is conveying, is come in, do what's expected, which is outlined in these core areas. I wouldn't necessarily call that role what it's named, but at least it outlines the expectations, I think, pretty clearly. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. And thinking about the role design itself, like the responsibilities, what this person's going to be doing on the day-to-day as communicated in the job ad. Same question. How would you rate this out of 10? Is this role sustainable, or is it a dumpster fire?
Oh, yeah, I would be cautious of this. I would be more on a 4. I think I wouldn't recommend pursuing this without knowing that you are going to be wearing very many hats. It doesn't look like there's a very clear job path forward. So you might be stuck doing this for several years without knowing what's next in your career. So if advancement is important to you, I would not recommend this role, or I would approach it with caution. But I think if it's an operator and someone who really likes to have a clear set of responsibilities and they can manage these different work streams quite well and they find that interesting, then this could be a good fit. But I wouldn't call it a creative, innovative role.
Yeah. And certainly you called out that they seem to want a very follow the rules person, but then they say that they don't. That's weird. That's going to cause some issues.
Yeah, they're going to run into that. They're going to bump up against that for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, Jen, thinking about the job ad itself, how it was written, what it communicated, what would you rate this out of 10? What's your score?
So I gave it a 7 out of 10 just for the job ad itself, because they do list a salary. They list a reporting structure. There are a lot of things that most job ads are missing. So I do appreciate that. They list their benefits in detail. There are benefits, so that's great. And it's pretty straightforward. Like, it explains what the job is. It explains, like you had mentioned, the requirements, the nice to haves versus essentials and things like that. I would have liked to have seen some kind of accommodation statement in the job ad as well. I would like to have seen some kind of AI disclosure. Are they going to be using AI to, at any point of the process? Docked points for things like asking for references up front. But in terms of like the job ad itself, yeah. When we talk about the job design, that's where I marked it a 4 out of 10, because I think, like we all agree, there's so many misalignments. I think they're gonna run into a lot of issues. It feels so rigid. And then I dug a little bit onto their social media on their website. And so there is, like, they ask at some point for the person to be like a compelling storyteller and have passion for like this like the organization's cause. But on the social media post, there is storytelling on the post. And so I just don't understand why they would take that away from a person who can use that. Like, are they not going to be using their storytelling and applying it? Like, it's just so weird. So yeah, that's a 4 out of 10 for job design for me. I don't know if there's a lot of growth opportunities. I can't imagine somebody staying in this position for longer than maybe like 1 or 2 years before moving on to something else, because I just don't think that it's not going to fill their bucket for them. All the reasons why they went to school for what they're doing, I don't think that they're going to get that fulfillment. So yeah, 4 out of 10 for me on the job design.
Yeah, it very much strikes me as you have to love the subject matter to really, really get into this. Like, I would be looking at this and being like, okay, if I'm a Civil War reenactor or like a history buff or something, maybe this is the coolest thing ever. But outside of that, yeah, it seems a little lacking. So for me on the job ad, for once I was like the generous person in the room. Writing of the job ad, the 8 out of 10. I thought the job ad itself was pretty darn good. There were no mistakes, no typos, no grammatical errors. There was no syntax stuff. Like, it was well written. They had a proofwriter, which it pains me to say that, like, that makes you stand out. But Jen and I have read so many job ads that are just total garbage that you can barely understand because nobody bothered to proofread them. That yeah, like they did pretty well for this. They also communicated the expectations of the role well in the job ad. Now, are the expectations reasonable? Different question. I got some things to say about that too, like both of you. But they communicated the expectations pretty well, I would say. They communicated their benefits pretty well. And I think they could have done more on that front. Like, they took the very traditional route with benefits. Like, you got health insurance, you've got AD&D, you've got like a healthcare spending account, you've got a 403B. Cool. And to some people, yeah, exciting, but it's not topical. None of that connects to the employer brand. None of that is really going to appeal to someone who really loves the subject matter. So like, that was kind of a miss. The things where I think they could have done better were talking about the employer brand and the mission more. They did talk about the mission a little bit, but only in a very surface way. So they said, we want to convince Americans that these hollowed battlefields are important, and we need to revere them and respect them. And we're going into the nation's birthday, which is July 4th this year, America's 250th birthday. So they kind of did surface level on that, but they didn't get me excited about it. Maybe that's a filter point. I don't know. Maybe they only want people who are already super excited about that stuff. But if I'm going into a competitive labor market looking for someone who just like checks all the boxes, I'm going to try a heck of a lot harder with that and convince people and tell them why this stuff matters, instead of assuming that they already know why all this stuff matters. Like, that was a big miss for me. Role design, yeah, 5 out of 10. Like you guys, the biggest point for me of dissonance was the social media and thing. Like, this role doesn't involve social media. Why? Like the way that they phrased that was like, you have absolutely nothing to do with social media, which is probably going to be one of the most creative parts of the job. Why is that? There's also, like you guys said, no pathway for growth here. This is going to be a couple of years, and that's it, unless like you love the subject matter and can live on 55 to 63 for like the rest of your life, sort of thing. People need salary growth over time for no other reason than to keep up with inflation. But some people, that's not important because they have a partner who makes a ton of money, or they own their house, or all these other factors. So you can have people who don't really need a salary to increase over time to be fine. They're more about fulfillment. If that's what this is, like, cool. But not having a pathway for growth, it's kind of a big miss for me. I would have really liked to see an org structure in this ad, or at the very, very least, I would have liked to see a bit of a description of the different working parts of the organization. So we talked about, the difference between communications and donor engagement, the difference between communications and marketing, the difference between communications and events. And there are enough hints in this that talk about role creep or suggest role creep that it would have been highly valuable to understand more of how the organization functions. You can ask that question in the interview for sure, but how much effort does it take to put that down in a couple of bullet points in the job ad? Not a lot. You can say there's a donor engagement team, there's a fundraising team, there's like a purchase and acquisition of land team. You can do that stuff very, very easily in the job ad. So why not? Especially with something like this where there's a ton of ambiguity. So for me, yeah, it wasn't great the way they designed this role. 5 out of 10, not super sustainable.
I agree with you, Paul, on how important it would be to understand the way the organization is structured. And I think it would also be very important to understand the budget and the revenue expectations. If they can even say you would be indirectly responsible for a $1 million plus revenue stream or something, events or the trust portion of the organization, and then you can have access to or would be responsible for a 6-figure operating budget per year. Do they have agency support, or is it just on your own? It's just you, it's one of one. You are responsible for building everything from scratch. Or do you have a bench behind you? You can work with agency partners or consultants or paid advertising. You have access to these funds. I think if a nonprofit is able to incorporate some statement like that, it helps you understand the strength of their bench and the resources that you would have available to you in stepping into this role.
That's a good point. Having a sense of how large these events are and what kind of money they typically bring in from a fundraising perspective is pretty good context. Like you could read that and say, oh, okay, I'm going to be doing a certain type of thing because these donors got tons of money. And there's a certain expectation. Like that gives you a pretty good flavor for what that could be versus, we have a newsletter with 100,000 people on it. We mail them something once a month, like a little magazine, and there's a little form in it that they like handwrite and give us a check and rip it out and mail it back. 2 very different things, right? Having an understanding of that up front probably be pretty useful to somebody who's seriously considering this job.
That experience with a nonprofit, one of the responsibilities was to manage a paid advertising program. So I assumed it's a big paid advertising program. And upon starting to actually work with them, this is after the interview process, I found out that the budget was less than $10,000. And I said, oh, per week or per month? And they said, no, just total overall. And I was blown away. So I think being able to at least ask that in the interview process, and then bonus points if the organization puts some of that information in the job description up front, then they can attract the right talent, people that can say, I've managed $100,000 annual budget easily. I can definitely step into that. Or no, I've only ever managed $5,000 for the whole year. That's a big stretch. So I think having that information would help both parties.
I think you're absolutely right. Having that information, and then they ask for a cover letter too. So you can speak to that, even for the screening process, you can speak to that in your cover letter. Like you've got the information there. You can find that connection point right away. So yeah, I think that's the more information you can share, the better. It's going to be easier for you to find your ideal candidate when you provide more information. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, $10,000, that's not going to go very long, especially when you consider that their activities are non-digital, right? Like I think about out-of-home ad campaigns and buys, like $10,000 would get you about a half day, half network in Toronto's like subway. And that's it. Like $10,000, not going to go very far. So you're right. Like having a sense of what the budget that you would be managing, if you're managing the budget, would be super valuable. Now, maybe the director is that person, right? And I would, if I was a communications associate, if I was applying for this job, and the salary was what it was, and the organization said you're going to be in charge of administering an advertising budget of $1 million, I'd be like, cool, 20% more money, please. Well, I think that we can consider this ad roasted. Thank you very much, Katelyn McArdle, for joining us in the virtual studio today. It was an absolute hoot. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, everybody. We will see you next week.
Glad you could spend some time with us on Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points. If today's episode helped you make sense of the hiring landscape, or at least feel less alone in navigating it, don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on YouTube or follow the show on whatever podcast app you trust with your sanity. We're always looking for interesting job postings to break down. So if you've got one, whether it's surprisingly good or impressively confusing, send it in. Listener submissions keep things spicy. Follow that link in the show notes for more. Thanks again for listening. Catch us next time when we take on another posting that definitely has something to say.